Today, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to interview the management of a company. And this is a bit off the beaten track. It used to be in a hot space, which is cannabis. This industry has been left for dead for a very, very long time. And I think maybe it's time to come back and look at it again. So with me today is Glasshouse Brands.
We are the largest cultivator on the planet today. We are excited. We don't think anybody can grow as cheap as we can.
Most cannabis companies that I have looked at are not profitable. You have driven down the cost enormously. It's actually very impressive given the horror that this industry has gone through over the last 5 years.
People may not know the Glasshouse name, but we've actually been doing this for about a decade now.
Tell us what happened in July.
On July 10th in the state of California, there were probably 100 ICE operations throughout the state in agriculture. The biggest one was ours, and a riot broke out right in front of the farm.
Wow. And what did you learn along the way to cut your costs in half? It's quite impressive.
Steve, even though we hit some records in the second quarter, we are not done. There is a massive opportunity for a new American industry.
So let's get started, gentlemen. Hi, this is Steve Eisman, and welcome to another episode of the Real Eisman Playbook. And today, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to interview the management of a company. And this is a bit off the beaten track. It's a company whose market cap is less than $1 billion. It used to be in a hot space, which is cannabis. And the name of the company is Glasshouse Brands. And full disclosure, I'm a shareholder. I'm a very recent shareholder. And I view this as a fairly speculative position, but this company, unlike many companies in the industry, actually makes money, which is a real testament to this management team, because making money in cannabis, given all the things that have happened over the last several years, is not easy. Now, I know that people use cannabis recreationally, they use it medicinally, and on the other hand, there are people who view this as a gateway drug. And we're not going to get into any of the politics of that or the ethics of it, because as I've said many times before, this is a business markets podcast. We take government policy as is. I do not try to influence it. I'm not here to pump and dump. I'm not here to drive the stock price up like crazy. This is a podcast that's dedicated to education. President Trump, about a month or so ago, got on Truth Social and said some very, very positive things about cannabis, which got me thinking that maybe there's an opportunity here. And for those of you who don't know, circa around 2018, this was a super, super hot group because everybody and his brother thought that the Biden administration was going to legalize cannabis. And a tremendous amount of capital got raised, and the Biden administration did nothing. And this industry has been left for dead for a very, very long time. And I think maybe it's time to come back and look at it again. So with me today is Glasshouse Brands. We have the CEO, Kyle Kazan. And standing next to him, who I wasn't expecting, is the CFO, whose name is, please give us your name, sir.
Mark Vendetti.
Mark Vendetti. We have Graham Farrar, who's the president. And we have John DeCourcy, who's head of IR. So let's get started, gentlemen. Let's just start very simply. Describe the breadth of your business. What do you do, and how do you do it? And where do you do it?
So number one, thank you, Steve, for having us on. It's quite an honor. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And I like the way you're looking at the space, meaning it's almost like, why weren't we talking about FanDuel and DraftKings 2 years ago? Boy, I wish I had invested back then. I think we may be the next industry that becomes legalized and becomes a normal industry. Over the last 10 years, companies have been formed under the prohibitionary market, which is what we're in right now, where it's a state by state and you have to vertically integrate. Glasshouse built with the vision that someday we will be a legalized industry, and we felt the number one state for cannabis, for many reasons, which we can get into if you'd like, is California.
Yeah, we definitely want to get into that. Go ahead.
It's also the largest legal market in the world. And we felt, let's just vertically integrate in California and build for the future. and endure the present while almost all the other companies are built for the present and are going to have to endure the future. And so we own in our company 6 million square feet of cultivation through greenhouse space. And that's the best way to grow it for the planet. Most importantly, in California, it's the lowest cost way to grow nationwide if you grow it like that in California, given all the sunshine that we have. And so we are currently not utilizing for grow all 6 million square feet as we're building into it. But we are the largest cultivator on the planet today. And as you said, after the ice raid, it's caused a little bit of pause, but
People don't know about that. We will come to that.
we'll cover it. But once we're back to where we were and we're moving back that way quickly, we are a cash flow positive company. And so we are excited. We don't think anybody can grow as cheap as we can. And as a cultivator, we grow amazingly good cannabis and have won awards and do it at such a low cost that we can provide a very good value for the consumers here in California that are also the most sophisticated in the world.
So you grow cannabis and you sell it wholesale. That's your biggest business.
That's our biggest business. We also own and manage 11 stores throughout the state of California. We also have a manufacturing facility, so we can make gummies. We are fully vertically integrated across, but our number one engine for cash and cash generation is wholesale sales of our biomass.
And in retail, what are your brands? What are they called? So people know.
Graham, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. So Glasshouse Farms is kind of our flagship brand. It's named after the company. Allswell is one of our newer brands, and it's particularly special because it is the best quality for the lowest cost of anything out on the market. We have it on the shelves for $7.50 an eighth, with all the crazy cannabis taxes, still has you out the door under $10. That's actually the most consumed cannabis in the entire state of California. So if you look at California, the world's largest cannabis market, Allswell is the most consumed flower in it. And then we have Allswell has gummies as well. And then Plus is our main edibles brand, which has everything from things to help you sleep, pain relief, to a good time on a Friday night.
So let's talk up I still want to just lay groundwork. In the second quarter, you were profitable. You were actually quite profitable. You had a 53% gross margin. You had about an 18-ish percent EBITDA margin. If I normalized your earnings and took out all the one-timers and tax affected, your ROE is in the mid to high teens. How'd you get there? Because this is most cannabis companies that I have looked at, and I haven't looked at a ton of them, but I've certainly looked at them, are not profitable. You have driven down the cost enormously. Walk me through the process of how you have accomplished that, because it's actually very impressive given the horror that this industry has gone through over the last 5 years.
So the two things that I would tell you, Steve, one, we're very careful about loading up debt. We think debt is a killer, and I happen to believe that, in all of my businesses, that if you're not strategic about it, it'll kill you, and that's killed a lot of companies in this space. Two, we started with 150,000 square feet of greenhouse, remembering that we're now a total, including that one, of 6 million. And from day one, we knew that this would be a race to the bottom. Every business is a race to the bottom, right? Sears Roebuck was fantastic until it was not. And then, it became Walmart, then it became Amazon. And the one thing that we all know is it becomes a race to the bottom. You give the consumer the best value for the best price and you win. And so we knew that. Graham and I are the co-founders of the company. And from day one, we said, how do we get, cheaper, faster, while maintaining the value? And he was one of the original guys at Sonos, the tech company. So he's got Moore's Law in his head all the time. And so the reason we're public and the reason was to buy the 5.5 million square foot farm, and some of the tools that we saw there being the second largest greenhouse facility in America for all products. We knew that would provide scale, provide some of the tools. And with the know-how that we learned across the first two farms we bought, we were able just to continue to drive COGS down. And I will tell you, Steve, even though we hit some records in the second quarter. We are not done. Like our goal is to continue to push them down so that in the future, when Mexico and Colombia and Panama, when they all come online, we have found a way through everything we do to beat them, even with their lower labor costs.
In the first quarter of 2024, the cost per equivalent, the way you describe it, cost per equivalent dry pound of production was $182. And in the second quarter of 2025, so basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 quarters, you cut that from 182 to 91. You cut it in half. That's abnormal. It's abnormal to cut your production costs in half in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 quarters. Was that a scale, just a pure scale issue, or what did you learn along the way to cut your costs in half? It's quite impressive.
So I shared the commitment. Let me let our CFO kind of share some of the numbers, so because there's a little bit of seasonality in there as well. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think there's an element of both improved efficiency and leverage in terms of as you grow, you can amortize your fixed costs and your other costs that are generally more fixed into your costs. Now, the one thing to just remember is that Q1 is typically seasonally our lowest production output because of the sunlight, and we're a greenhouse, so plants like the sunlight. Q2 is much stronger, but again, it's a function. I'll let Graham talk a little bit more about this, but we've been able to leverage the workforce. We use automation, so the facility in Camarillo employs the latest automation. It's not just, we look at automation in the world of agriculture, not just cannabis. So a lot of what we do at the farm is employed beyond cannabis. The facility itself is technologically very advanced. We generate a lot of our own electricity. It has solar panels. It has cogeneration, 3 cogeneration, where we can buy gas, create heat, create CO2 for the plants, and then sell electricity back to the grid. So there are a lot of innovations at the farm that we truly leverage, and between that scale and efficiency, that's how we've driven the price down in half.
Yeah, one note, Steve, in there is Kyle alluded to it, but people may not know the Glass House name, but we've actually been doing this for about a decade now, right? So it's not that necessarily that we're geniuses. It's now that we have a fantastic team who's got centuries of combined experience. And as Kyle mentioned, we started at 150,000 square foot, which felt really big. We were able to make mistakes and learn things there, and then went to a 350,000 square foot facility and did it again. So when we stepped in the first million and now the second million and getting ready for the third million down at the new facility, we have a lot of experience coming into this. We've also tried really hard to do what Kyle and I refer to as first principles, right? Growing in a warehouse with electricity made from coal in Massachusetts is not where cannabis wants to grow. Cannabis wants to grow like strawberries, like wine, in beautiful sunny Southern California. And we've tried to not violate those principles so that we're able to build on a foundation that's strong, that we don't have to make up for, but rather helps us out, right? So we get the free sunlight from the sky. It's fantastic economically. It's fantastic environmentally. This is where this plant likes to grow, right? And so we really focused in on that, combined with the facility, combined with the experience, combined with the CapEx investments to be able to get, our goal is simple. It's to grow the best weed for the least amount of money, which translates to scalable, consistent, high quality, great value for the consumer. Walmart, pick your brand. It's a winning combination. And that's really what we've been striving at for the last decade.
So if in the second quarter, it was costing you $91 to produce this product, other states, some of your out-of-state competition, obviously don't compete outside California, but hopefully one day you will.
Yeah.
What are their costs like? I forget about quality. I know from reading that everybody considers California, the best quality marijuana. It's like it would be like comparing California wine versus Massachusetts wine.
Sure.
So
we know which one you want.
We know which one you want to drink. We know which one you don't want to drink. But
when Napa wine walks in, and
leave that aside. Leave the quality issue aside for a second. Just pure costs. you're around $100 roughly. Where are people who are in other states? At what cost level do they produce? So we can
It's tough because it's not something that many others disclose, which might be a question that someone would ask why they don't, or why people aren't more transparent with that. We had a few reference points. There's a couple public companies, most of them now defunct in California. You mentioned California's, it's not only are we making money, but we're making money in the most competitive, lowest price states in the country. And we have some reference points there. There was at one point where another public company reported we had 52% margins and they had negative 2%. So you can do some extrapolation. I think most other folks' costs are probably 4 to 6x what we're growing at.
4 to 6 times in just California, or people outside California?
Across, typically you find more expensive growing as you move east. The West Coast, predominantly California, is really the best place to grow. The further east you go, the more environmental, the more you have to kind of play Mother Nature for her, because you're growing the plant in a place it doesn't actually like to grow. You got to replace the wind. You got to replace the cooling breeze with air conditioning. You replace the sun with lights that are very expensive to operate. So it typically gets more expensive as you move east.
So let's talk about for a second the illegal competition that you guys always face. Look, I never bought any weed. I have no idea how this works. But if you're buying it illegally, forget about legal versus illegal. The competition that you're against that's illegal, what do they charge compared to you? Just give me a little bit of that landscape. I read one article by someone who argued that there's basically a ceiling on how much prices could ever go up in cannabis, because if the people who are legal raise it too much, everybody goes to the illegal. So just give me an idea of what's the illegal competition like. And I know California's been cracking down recently. Let's talk about that as well.
One comment, I think you're right on to ask about the illicit market. The illicit market is currently probably 2/3 of the overall national market, and it's a tough competitor. It's also a really great focus group because it tells you what consumers want when the only law is to deliver to make the customer satisfied. And what you see is what they want is California cannabis across the country.
So if it's 2/3 of the national market, what percentage is illegal in California? Or is it roughly?
I think it's probably representative. It's probably similar across the states and across the country.
Okay.
There might be some examples like Montana does a really nice job with having a lot of dispensaries. So I think they've probably captured more of the market in the regulated space. But in general, the limited licensing, there's California, for example, there's 1,000 dispensaries roughly, right? There's 10,000, 11,000 liquor stores, right? There's 75,000 places you can get a drink. There's only 1,000 places you can buy a joint. So that leaves a lot of people here in California, 7 years into adult use, 60% of the municipalities still don't have an open store. So there's just a full convenience. There's weed deserts all over, even in California. And a lot of the rest of the country is similar. The beautiful thing about what we're doing and why Allswell is exciting is because Allswell it competes directly with that market, yet gives consumers more. So for the same price that you could buy something illicit that's not taxed, not tested, you don't know what's in it, you don't know what chemicals are applied to it, you can buy Allswell fresh from the farm, fully regulated, fully tested, fully labeled, and know exactly what you're consuming. Same thing for the Allswell gummies. And I think that, there's one law that's unbeaten. It's the law of economics. You can regulate it. You can try and tax it. You can do all these things. But if you can give the consumer the best product for the least amount of money, you win. And that's what we're working to do, licensed or otherwise.
Okay, so let's move on. I want to talk about what happened in July. I want to talk about regulation. And then I want to dream a little bit, because you guys are, I think, running 3 glass houses right now, and you have 6. So we're going to talk about what the company might look like. So let's talk about, because not everybody knows, obviously, because this is a space that I said was left for dead. Tell us what happened in July, which was a very, very ugly day.
So most of your viewers will know what happened, because all of a sudden they'll recollect. We were that pot farm, whether you watch Fox, MSNBC, or somewhere in between. July 10th, there was, on July 10th in the state of California, there were probably 100 ICE operations throughout the state in agriculture. The biggest one was ours, not because we're cannabis, but because we have such a large facility with so many people working there. And when they executed a warrant at our facility, there were so many people there that a lot of people from Camarillo, Ventura, they converged on our facility, and a riot broke out right in front of the farm.
Wow.
And that's what made it very newsworthy, where actually somebody shot at the police, and there were tear gas canisters, that, a video of kids, and I mean, it was pretty melee out there. And so that became quite newsworthy. But basically what happened was an ICE operation happened where they were looking for people that were not here in this country legally. And again, throughout the state of California on that Thursday, there were a lot of ICE raids targeted towards agriculture. The thing that was different when that happened to us, we immediately said, let's figure this out. We hired Julie Myers Wood and her company Guidepost. She is the former ICE director under the George W. Bush administration. And I said, Julie, how do we do this so that we could invite ICE to just come on our facility? Right now, we have hundreds of thousands of plants and no people. We have a really difficult situation, and we're not the only one, but we're going to be competing for people. And I said, is it ID Verify? Because I've read that's the gold standard. E-Verify, sorry. She said, absolutely not. She said, there's ways to defeat it. Look at the New York Times, that meat packing plant. They were employing that, and they have no workers. And I'm like, oh my God. So I said, look, we have to get to a level immediately. And this country is not built for this. We don't have those systems in place with the United States government. That said, we decided that we would use Julie and our lawyers to hand verify ID, and there's a picture and a video of me with my passport and my face on a Zoom with the lawyers to make sure, yep. And then I was allowed to go through, and then I got a badge. And we rebadged every single person that we have, and even the FLCs.
What's FLCs?
So great question. Those are farm labor companies. And primarily all but 9 of the reported 361 people that were detained from our facility, 9 were ours that worked for Glass House. In this country, agriculture is built on farm labor companies. Why? Because if all of us owned a farm and we're growing tomatoes, row crops, you don't need the same level of people, except really during harvest. Once harvest is done, then you would lay people off. Here, what you do is you just go to the farm labor company and say, from this date to this date, we need this many people. They bring them, you pay a premium, and then they take them away. So you just contract labor. We're no different because of our seasonality. We do the same thing. So the majority of our farm workers come through farm labor companies. And I would tell you, Steve, I asked them very recently in Ventura County, Santa Barbara County, where our farm labor companies provide a lot of the labor. I said, how many other companies are doing exactly what we did, which was to invite ICE, which we have. We've said, come on out anytime you want, no warrant. We don't want any issues. Just come on out. They said, there's only one company that's done it. It's you. So I'm like,
so you have now, anyone who steps on your property is verified as someone who's allowed to be in the United States.
Verified that they're over 21, e-verified, and they've had their documents checked by experts to make sure they're not fraudulent.
We have done everything we could to make ourselves bulletproof. Is it possible somebody snuck through, and even though we went through the entire process, is it possible one person or 2 people got through? It's possible, but I would like to think that every single person that's there, we've gone through the process. We've gone through
We've climbed to the top of that mountain.
Yeah.
I think it's the most vetted agriculture workforce that's ever been built in history, would be my guess. It's worth remembering just how big, like it's hard to kind of picture what we are. Our farm is 165 acres. So it's like 50 blocks, right? So not only did we have hundreds of people working the farm, we were under construction of 40 acres. So we had hundreds of people working the construction. We've got security contractors. We've got people dropping off fertilizer, refilling vending machines, right? So it is a miniature city. And as Kyle mentioned, there's 9 people that actually work for Glasshouse that detained everybody else. And we don't know the names or the numbers because none of that was actually released to us, actually worked for vendors who worked for us.
Understood.
Steve, let me give you one visual.
Sure.
And you're invited out, and everybody that's watching this should know we actually have an in-person annual meeting in June. It's usually the third Friday of June. All you have to do is buy one share, which right now is under $10. You can come on out there and you can walk. But the 6 greenhouses we have, each one of those, just one, can play every single Sunday NFL game at the same time. That's how big each one of those greenhouses is. So when you're walking it, you're like, oh my God, this thing is absolutely massive.
Each glass house is that big.
On that facility, yes.
Plus warehouses, plus water treatment facilities. Yeah, it's a big place.
So obviously, this was a setback for the company. Your revenue in the third quarter, as you publicly announced, is going to be lower than what you originally thought. You're moving through it. When do you think you'll be back to kind of where you were in the second quarter of this year?
I'm going to turn that over to Mark. Let our numbers guy give you the best.
So we expect to be I'm going to use the term back to normal production in terms of output and processing. Let's say in the first quarter of next year. And then you need to fully understand the life cycle of the plant, because if you think about it, takes, I'm going to say, we don't plant cannabis from seeds. We take cuttings from other cannabis plants, and we'll call them teens for like 3 weeks. And then they're in the greenhouse for, I'm going to call it roughly 60 days. And then once you harvest it, it's, I'm going to say, a 3-week period, because you want to dry it and then you trim it, right? So end to end, you've got a process that spans, we'll say, 3.5 months. So getting back to being fully planted from that point means you're going to have still a few months before you get back to your full revenue ramp, which again, we should be much closer by the time we hit the second quarter. And then the rest of the year is, the good news for us is the rest of the year, Q3 and Q4, is basically a replay of what we did in the last 2 quarters of 2024, except we've now got some greenhouse 2 in there, which is that, additional greenhouse that we're in the process of building out right now.
Okay, got it. So let's switch gears. I'm sure most of my viewers are not completely familiar with the entire federal regulatory landscape of cannabis. So before we even talk about what President Trump said and what could happen, just explain how cannabis currently is regulated by the federal government. How is it classified? And because of that classification, what are the implications? What under which you operate? Let's just start with that.
Yeah. So great question. There's a scheduling. Schedule 1 is the highest schedule and worst drug. And cannabis.
And that schedule was created by who? The FDA?
No, the DEA.
The DEA. Okay.
Yes, well, the Controlled Substances Act is what it's based on.
Okay. So marijuana is classified by the DEA as a Schedule 1 drug, which I'm assuming is the worst schedule you could have. This is the worst category you could have.
Most dangerous. Right next to fentanyl. Yeah. Fentanyl, heroin, even cocaine is more lightly scheduled than cannabis.
Okay. The DEA coded it that way. What does that mean for Glass House and every other cannabis company that operates in the United States?
So because it's a Schedule 1 drug, you can't transport it across state lines. In fact, they could come in and literally shut everybody down, everyone. But what happened was states, California, Colorado, Washington, they started saying, hey, it's not that big a deal. It does have medicinal purposes. And states decided, we're going to go ahead and legalize. And the federal government, once that started happening and real taxes started going to schools and police and fire and municipalities. All of a sudden, it was like, uh-oh. So those politicians got on board. And the federal government has basically taken a position for the last 10 years, or actually a little bit more, saying, all right, if you're following state law, we'll leave you alone. And there's been some amendments and some memos and all that kind of stuff. So where we sit today is in that construct where the federal government basically just stands back and says, we respect you if the states are good with you.
So so basically what that means is if you grow it in California and you sell it in California, the federal government basically takes a blind eye to it.
If you're licensed by the state that you operate in, they'll leave you alone.
They leave you alone.
Yep. And really and truly, they also, in where states that it is legal, it's hard for the federal government, if they wanted to take it to court, to get a jury to go 12-0 against somebody who's growing cannabis that most people now have family members, friends, they're using cannabis and they don't think it's a big deal. So there is that.
Let's elaborate a little bit because it's more than just in terms of restrictions. So tell me about other restrictions.
Banking, credit cards, listing on major exchanges. I mean, it's treated, and you think about it, I think one of the things people forget is,
I repeat that again slowly.
yeah, so
Give me a list.
Yeah. Okay. So 280E it's the taxes. Basically, it's an IRS tax code that says you're drug dealers because you're Schedule I drugs, and so you can't deduct your business expenses. So it raises the effective marginal tax rate on businesses higher than any other industry.
So what is your effective tax rate now under this?
So we've actually looked at the tax code, and we've made a call that the way it's structured, the 280E tax is not applicable. That's a position we've taken. We could end up at some point running into a discussion with the IRS about it. The difference between a 280E and non-280E for us is probably a marginal tax rate that's somewhere around 75 to 80%. And many of the large multi-state operators have also adopted the same position. In fact, most of them adopted that before we did. And so many people in cannabis have taken that position that 280E doesn't apply. But if it does, you're seeing many companies with marginal tax rates approaching 100% because it just takes, particularly retailers, it takes away all of their, rent's not deductible, sales people on the floor, marketing isn't deductible. And it just crushes them from that perspective.
Okay, so besides tax, Graham, give me more of a list of.
So the other thing is in our retail stores or anybody else's retail stores, you can't use credit cards, right? So you have to pay with cash, or if you're lucky, a debit card. It's a huge amount of friction. I think we'd probably see 20 to 30% increase in revenue if people could use the credit card like they normally do. You also see higher costs of capital. Kyle has done a great job in getting us a loan at 8.53%, I think, which is normal-ish rates. Most other capital in the industry is 9, 10, 13, 14, 15%. So you get a lot of friction there on the banking side. Another huge one is on the financial side is we're not currently, you see no cannabis companies, no American cannabis companies listed on U.S. exchanges. So no NASDAQ, no NYSE. That's why you typically see American cannabis companies listed on Canadian exchanges like the CBOE, Canada. The DAX has some as well. I think there's huge potential there because just the mere ability to custody the stocks, to buy them. Morgan Stanley, if you have a Morgan Stanley account, you currently can't buy a U.S. cannabis company. Now, it's ironic because you can buy a Canadian cannabis company, a Tilray, a Canopy. Those are all listed on senior U.S. exchanges. So it's not that we don't have cannabis companies. We've just given preference to the Canadian ones. All of our American businesses go to Canada and Canadian auditors and lawyers up there. So that's, and then probably the biggest from the market point of view is we're currently not allowed to sell in the other 49 states. And as we talked about, we know all the consumers in those states want exactly what we make.
Hold that thought for 1 second. So Kyle, why don't you tell because not everybody's on Truth Social. I am. Why don't you just tell them what President Trump put on Truth Social about a month or so ago, twice, because that's what piqued my interest.
Yeah. So twice he's put out something. By the way, candidate Trump also came out in favor of Amendment 3 in Florida, which was adult use, even though Ron DeSantis was against it. So that was adult use that he was openly in favor of.
Sorry, he was in favor of a what?
So Florida had a ballot measure during the election, that this last election, that was for medicinal to adult use. And he came out in favor of adult use publicly, even though Ron DeSantis was against that same Florida amendment.
I see.
So there's that one. That was a huge deal because it showed he tipped his hand towards saying, states' rights, let people decide for themselves. Then more recently, he said that something big is coming soon regarding cannabis. And that's been interpreted as either a reschedule, a Schedule 3, or a deschedule, which would then treat it more like alcohol and tobacco.
Okay, so let's talk about that for a second. So right now, the DEA codes cannabis as a Schedule 1 drug. The two possibilities that you're talking about is that it would go to a Schedule 3. What's that? Or just figure out basically no schedule. What's a Schedule 3?
So a Schedule 3 would treat it much more like a medicine. So it would fall under the purview of the FDA. And it could also be a 4 or a 5. It just sort of lowers it down. But everyone seems to be landing, common thinking is it's a Schedule 3 because that's where Joe Biden's recommendation was. We also know that President Trump, if he feels he could be like finishing what Joe Biden did, it would be a lot more likely that he would go 4 or 5 or deschedule, because I don't think he would want to just finish the Joe Biden job. So deschedule would then make it much more like alcohol or tobacco, which are both drugs as well, but don't have a schedule and are regulated mainly by the ATF, alcohol, tobacco, firearm, that group. So it just depends probably on where President Trump is, who presents it to him, and what the polling looks like. Most of us think a lot of what's driving this is the desire at the midterms to hold the House and the Senate. And to do that, he's going to need to draw in independents. And this is very big to independents. Most are in favor of cannabis. So it polls very well. I just don't know, does Schedule 3 poll better than Schedule 4 or 5 or deschedule?
So let's assume it's Schedule 3 for the sake of argument. At that point, does that mean that you could start shipping your product all over the United States?
So Schedule 3 drugs are allowed to be shipped around the country. I don't know. I think we're then going to have to work it out between the states so that, will New Jersey or Massachusetts allow us to ship from California there? And I think that's going to be kind of a state by state, almost like alcohol. Pennsylvania sold in state stores. Texas has blue laws here and there. I think that'll be worked out, but I think that'll take away any of the interstate commerce kind of issues. So, and also, we and some of our investors have talked to the top levels of the major exchanges, and we think that might, they're not definitive, but they're in the business of listing companies like ours. We think that might open it up as well. So there's a bit of a question mark. Also, one of the questions is, if hemp remains legal, are we going to be able to go ahead and ship that to Europe? Because right now, Canada, if Scott Bessent is watching this, I'd say, or President Trump is watching this, I would say, right now, us not doing anything is a gift to our friends from the North, because that industry was really hurting up there since they're growing up in the wilderness in the Arctic. And now they're shipping billions of dollars with a B to.
They're shipping. Are they shipping hemp? Is that what they're shipping, or everything?
Actually shipping cannabis because it's legal. If they just descheduled, we would then almost surely be able to compete with them. And I guarantee you, one, there was a great New York Times article about the illicit market from California. This is about 2 months ago in England. So there is, and people are willing to pay extraordinary prices that they wouldn't have to pay if we could just legally send our cannabis there. So there's a massive opportunity for a new American industry. And nothing against our friends to the North. They're great at growing syrup. That's the syrup I want when I'm eating pancakes. But cannabis should come from California, Oregon, and Washington because that's where the plant wants to.
Nobody in the rest of the world's begging for Canadian cannabis. It's just the only cannabis they can get. If we took down the walls and let our American companies, particularly those on the West Coast, ship the cannabis that everybody wants, Kyle referenced that article, they're paying $500 an ounce in the UK for California cannabis right now because that's the illicit, smuggled price. We're happy to sell cannabis here in California for $100 an ounce in a retail store, right? So if you think about that, 5x the price, right? And the rest of Germany is the same. Portugal's the same. There was another great article in Forbes by Javier Hasse about the multi-billion-dollar opportunity the rest of the world export of California cannabis could represent if we just took the chains off our companies and let them participate.
By the way, if it goes to Schedule 3, can somebody walk into your store then and use a credit card?
I think that's the belief. The implicit in Schedule 3 would be relief from 280E tax. The rest of it, interstate commerce, uplisting, and the financial reforms, I think people believe it would be directionally helpful, but it's not necessarily implicit in those. And Schedule 3 is like codeine, things like that. So it's still a regulated product. It'd be a little bit of an unknown, but it's certainly a drastic loosening of the regulations, which I think would only point towards it. And particularly with Trump, it's really, I think, interesting and informative to listen to what actually he says. He says he believes medical marijuana is a good thing, to use his words. He also, at the same time, and Kyle mentioned, he demonstrated this in the state he's a resident, he voted for adult use for cannabis. So he thinks medical cannabis is a good thing, and he thinks states' rights is a good thing. And if in his state, he wants adults who are 21 and over to be able to purchase it legally and safely.
So let's just dream a little dream here for a sec. You're currently operating 3 out of 6 glass houses. So let's say, let's start with this. Let's say these things happen and you can ramp up fairly rapidly, let's say, to 6 glass houses. Do I just take your revenue, multiply it by 2, and then you get some more efficiency? Like, just dream a little dream for me. If you're at full capacity, it's 6. And let's talk about, given how much land you have, how many more glass houses could you have? But let's just start with, you go from 3 glass houses to 6 glass houses. What do the financials of this company look like at that full capacity?
Great question. I'm gonna give that to Mark. But
of course you are.
Well, he is the most accurate, and he spends his time watching our decimal points and everything else. But I would also say, if we're just using the California pricing, we're the lowest probably in the world. I would have to think that if we're interstate commerce and around the world, the pricing would increase. But let's go ahead and share.
So the easiest way, like from a benchmark, we did $200 million in 2024. And we had, just from a footprint, one of the glass houses, as you would say, is used for the nursery. We had 2 that were actually cultivating, producing plants, and the 200 million. So if you just said you're going to go the remaining 3, you could say, boy, that's a $500 million revenue, right? Then, as Kyle said, the step up is if you get interstate commerce, prices in California are, 25, 30% lower than other parts of the country, right? So if we could ship our product outside of California, the same pound we're selling in California, you could get 2, 3, 4x that in other parts of the country. So you could get significant revenue expansion. And shipping cannabis, we've done some back of the envelope. You can put it on a 42-foot trailer and drive it across country for only a couple $1,000s. So it actually, transporting it adds no cost whatsoever. So you can get significant revenue expansion without cost increases whatsoever.
You'd be a lot more profitable, clearly.
And margins could expand.
Hundreds of millions of dollars more profitable.
They're not going to increase dramatically because of that move. And that doesn't include an overseas or a global opportunity.
Let me just end with this question. So you're operating 3 glass houses. You have 3 additional now, but you got a lot of land. So how many more of these glass houses, if you had some, if you wanted to invest, could you create?
So we right now we run 2 of those as flower houses, 1 as a propagation. The other 3 have not been turned on. So that's where Mark kind of goes from 200 to 500. In that land, we can't add any more greenhouses there. That said, there's nobody better connected to Ventura and Santa Barbara counties, which are, we think, the best places to grow than us. And ours is the only farm that has 8 full-size truck bays with a cooled warehouse. So that could become the main distribution hub. So if you look at us like Sunkist or Driscoll's Strawberries, where they don't own their entire supply chain, they sort of broker and bring it in. I think our potential is to be much more of the supply chain for the country, maybe even more than that, the world, if we can, just from Southern California, and we could expand greatly pretty quickly and use our base of operations as our distro hub.
Okay.
Yeah, and to clarify, so it's about 165 acres of land with 120 acres of greenhouse on there. As Kyle mentioned, we have 2 out of 5 greenhouses. So what you've seen so far is really only 2/5 of our productive capacity that could come out of that farm. So there's a tremendous amount of upside, both in the scale, and we touched on it lightly, but I'm not sure it's worth repeating. California has the most discerning, most competitive, lowest price market in the country. Basically every other state we look to, whether that be with descheduling, rescheduling, hemp, et cetera, those customers are all paying sometimes multiples more than what people in California are paying. So every other market, when you said build a little dream, even just within this country, what we sell, our Allswell product, is likely higher quality and 1/3 the cost of what you would find in New Jersey or New York out there, right? That's just within this country. You start thinking about rest of the world, export, Germany, UK, Portugal, EU, and you find pricing that can be 5-6 times what we have here in California, right? So we have built this to be a profitable company in the most competitive, lowest price market in the state with the most discerning competition and customers. If you can win in California, you can win everywhere else. And the inverse of that is definitely not true. It's like training at altitude. We've been doing it for a decade now. We will eventually get access to the rest of this market. And when we do, it's going to be like bringing a knife to a pillow fight.
Gentlemen, thank you. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute investment advice. The host and guests may hold positions in stocks discussed. Opinions expressed are their own and not recommendations. Please do your own due diligence and consult a licensed financial advisor before making any investment decisions.